Welcome in, everybody, to Grind Time, powered by Full Time Fantasy and the FFWC. I am your host, Billy Muzio, and with me today, a special guest, Lindsay Rhodes. Lindsay is the host of the NFL Rhodes Show and podcast, and also the host of Fantasy Dirt, or co-host Fantasy Dirt on SiriusXM Radio, Channel 87. She's also the host on DirectTV. She's a Los Angeles area Emmy Award winner for Best Sports Reporting in 2004. She's an American sportscaster and journalist, formerly with NFL Network. I'm excited to have you on today, Lindsay, and talk football. I love your mind in the industry and excited to see what we can discuss today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so off air we were just talking about Top Gun, and we were talking about flying in planes and the movie. I know we both liked the movie.
Yeah.
A little too much cheese for you said?
Way too much cheese for me. So I watched it in the theaters originally, and then the reason we were talking about it was because my whole family, my brother's family, was here for Christmas, and we all sat down and watched Top Gun on Paramount on Christmas night. And the first half of the movie with all of the callbacks, I'm like, really? Like, do we have to do all of them? Like, leave a subtle Easter egg for those of us, here and there for those of it. Like, they redid the whole first half of the movie. But then when they got into the mission, it was great. But then I have another problem at the end when he went back to the bar to get the girl, Penny, and she's not there. And so he leaves. He just leaves. He's like out at his hangar. Like, that was like, I tried. Oh, well. And then she goes to him. I'm like, why'd you go to him? Like, let him come to you. Anyway, they clearly did it so they could recreate the whole her leaning on the car like Kelly McGillis did at the end. But again, they went way out of their way to do the callbacks as opposed to it made no sense. I was like, she needs to just go about her life and let this dude figure things out.
Hangers are better for photo shoots. I think that's what it was.
I guess. Oh, man. Whatever.
Well, let's hop in. I want some ice-breaking questions at first. Get to know you a little bit more.
Okay.
How long have you been in the sports reporting and podcasting business?
What year is it? It's been 20 years. God, it's been more than 20 years. It's been more than 20 years. We don't need to need to get into specifics. That happens to me all the time though. When I'm like, oh, that guy that I covered him in high school, those guys are all out of the league.
Except Tom Brady.
Yeah, except for Tom Brady. Who's my age and still playing. Meanwhile, the people that I turned into a professional broadcaster, covered them in high school, not even in the NFL, high school, and then they went through college and in the NFL and are out of the other. Deshaun Jackson, he was on my high school show and announced that he was going to Cal on my high school show. Did the whole hat thing,
That's cool.
And I was really mad because he didn't go to USC, and he pretended like he was going to USC, and then he was like, no, and threw the hat away. No, I wasn't really mad. I didn't care. But anyway, now that guy's like, hey, this old guy's going to bring his crutches and wheel himself out to the field. That's where I am now.
Yeah, except for Tom Brady. Tom Brady just appears to just continue to play and play and play. I love the stats that we're seeing now that he's playing in some of these newcomers like Brock Purdy wasn't even born yet, and it's amazing to see.
I don't love those stats.
I was actually holding out hope that Frank Gore would play with his son in the NFL. I thought that would have been cool, but we never got to see it. But we're pretty close. Let's talk about your career a little bit. How did you get to where you're at today, and what was the path that you took?
So I did. I wanted to go into sports broadcasting. Went to USC and kind of got in. Did an internship in the sports information office there. And then that led to relationships at the local level there, Fox Sports West people coming through. And then I did an internship at Fox Sports West. I did a bunch of behind the scenes stuff there. I was an intern. I was a production assistant. I was the timeout coordinator, the person that raises their hand at basketball games. And I was instructed to throw my soda on the court if they tried to play before we were back from break. I was like, I'm not going to do that. I don't think that I want all these people that mad at me, but anyway, so did all of those types of jobs and then did a few on-air things for them, like a high school profile here. I'm trying to think if there was anybody that anyway, I feel like there was a Carson Palmer, that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
He was in high school at the time when I was kind of doing that transition. And then I went from there to a small market, worked in Yakima, Tri-Cities, Washington for a little bit. And
I know
Santa
that
Barbara.
very well.
and then came back to LA, did all the like regional sports and all of the different roles, which was such good experience because, you know, you're like one day you're reporting from a Los Angeles Kings hockey game, and then you're hosting a USC football show, and then you're doing sideline on the Lakers. And so all of the different, Los Angeles has so many different teams and obviously all of the different sports. The one thing that's funny is that the one thing we didn't have was an NFL team. Like the NFL was the only thing that was not on my radar. I worked there for 6 years. People would talk about the NFL. I'm like, nope, got enough. I got enough here. I got hockey, I got basketball, I got college, I got all the things, baseball. And then people were like, hey, they're starting this new NFL network and it's here in Los Angeles and you should go try it out. Like you obviously are into football. I did a lot of USC college football, UCLA too, but more relevantly USC. And so I went to NFL Network and I was like, I don't really know anything about the NFL. And they're like, you know, football though. So, you know, we'll figure it out. And thank goodness that was something that they were willing to let me figure out because I fell in love with it. And I love the idea. So I worked for 12 years at NFL Network. And then it's been a couple of years since then where you're just focusing on just 32 teams. And I love that. I love that, like the fact that I had all of these different experiences covering all these different sports. So it's all like stuff that you put in your, you know, your backpack and you like have all of these things to call back on. But then to just focus on 32 different teams, you're not doing homework every single night. Like the only thing that you're focusing on is what's new that day because you already know everything, you know, because you're paying attention consistently. And I fell in love with that. And I obviously love football and I love covering the league.
It's amazing that your beginning of your career started in Tri-Cities. So I did my first solo flight flying to Tri-Cities. And I pissed off the tower. Like I got grounded there. Like I landed.
Did you buzz the tower?
Yeah, did not buzz the tower.
Requesting.
So I come in. It's you know, for a single pilot like myself or a student pilot at the time, it was a large airport for me coming in a Cessna. And I land on. They have 2 runways. I land on the right. I come in and they have a fairly complex taxi system. And so I landed and I was looking at the taxi diagrams. I'm trying to talk to the tower. It's a lot to do for a student pilot at the time. And I kind of got a little flustered. So I asked for progressive taxi, which you're by all means legally allowed to do. And so that means they give you like turn right here at A3, turn left here at B4, right? And they give you kind of step-by-step instructions to where you're going to go and taxi through. Otherwise, you have to have the diagram pulled up and you're kind of looking through it as you're communicating. And so on the way back, I was like, I think I know the way back. I'm pretty good, but I'm a student pilot. It's my first solo by myself. And I said, can I get progressive taxi again? You could hear the breath from the tower. And so he made me wait for like 30 minutes until someone else left and I followed him out.
Oh my gosh.
And then I get up in the air and like to this day I have no idea what the guy said. And so I definitely flustered him. He got angry because they were busy. There was Airbuses and a bunch of big jets landing and taking off. And here I am in this 172 and he says something. I said, "Sir, I don't know what you say. Can you repeat that?" And he said it again. And still I said, "I'm sorry, sir. You're coming in kind of broken up. Can you repeat that?" By all means, he wasn't broken up, but I just couldn't hear him. Right. And third time, finally, I said, "Sir, I'm sorry, student pilot. I don't know what you're saying." And he was so angry. He pretty much just said, "At your leisure, just leave." Pretty much. So,
oh man,
that's my only memory of Tri-Cities is upsetting the tower up there. But I agree.
It's so stressful learning how to fly because it's not like you could be like, let's just give it a go.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like.
But I agree. The NFL is something I have fallen in love with as well. I also love the fact there's 32 teams. Like, try to get into college. It's just so much, too much for me on top of the NFL, trying to learn all the kids that are coming in every single year and then, learning the systems and the coaches. And there's a lot. It really is.
Especially now because, like, they're not even in one place for a while. It's like, oh, that guy was on that team last year, but now he's over here. And then it's just it's harder. It's harder.
Yeah, transfer portal definitely changed things. What is your favorite part about your job?
I like, oh gosh, there's so many things. I really like finding out, like I'm naturally curious and I like finding out things that I think other people don't know or bringing information to the forefront that people don't know. I like challenging concepts of like, well, we think we know that, but is that actually what's really happening? And all of my years of experience have kind of, I've gotten to the point where I now have the confidence to go, to kind of push back a little bit. Like I spent a lot of years in my business, particularly, I was like a reporter. And so I was raised on big J journalism. Like, you are not the story, your opinion does not matter, all of that kind of stuff. And then obviously the industry's changed dramatically in the last decade or so, where like you kind of better bring something to the table that sets you apart. And now it feels weird when you have people who are like, I am talking in a journalism voice and I am not an actual human. And like nobody actually, you're like, what, why? So it's been interesting to watch the arc of sitting in meetings with people and kind of bouncing things off of them and realizing like, oh, I think actually like the things that I'm saying they're responding to. Like, I think I'm onto something. That doesn't mean that I'm right all the time, but like the things that pop into my head when certain things happen, I have had enough experiences that have told me like they're valid thoughts. So go ahead and feel free articulating them, because when you bounce them off a former or a Hall of Fame player or a former coach or something like that, you end up in a conversation that's interesting. And it made me realize that there was some validity to where I was coming from, even though I had never played the game, which obviously is like a massive insecurity that I think you carry with you, or I did for a while. And then I just got over that because of those experiences that I'm detailing. And I think my favorite part is kind of bringing like all of these different experiences that I have that have led me to think the way that I do. And I think I have a different voice to a degree. I look at things a little bit differently because my experiences are that way. Because I didn't play, I also kind of came at it with like I didn't have a really strong opinion at the outset. And I think that was a good way to kind of give people benefit of the doubt and like realize that, there's a lot of gray in all of this. And so I'm very kind of anti-hot take. I'm very not anti like that it exists. I get that people love it and it's clearly a very popular format, but it's just not my thing. I like getting to like the real answers, the things that feel like they're a little bit more. Yes. Yeah. The stuff
I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I want a little bit more of a baseline and something to support the thesis, to be able to just, actually fall into the data and be able to describe what's actually happening and have a more better understanding of the actual concept, in my opinion.
Yeah. I want to learn about it. Like, I want to ultimately come out the other side and feel like I'm smarter about the subject matter. And I'm constantly in search of information that makes me smarter. And so I think the last couple of years doing my podcast, that's been the best part of that for me, is that finally I have been in a position for the first time in my career to just be like, who do I want to talk to this week? What information do I think will make me smarter about the subject matter that I want to talk about here? And so I can call on people from all these different, areas of expertise, or like little like lanes within our sports media industry. And I think it's been a really interesting process for me.
And of those lanes, you get to talk to some brilliant minds in the industry, and it's the amount of knowledge that you're able to consume because of those contacts. Who would you say are some of your favorite? And I hate to put you on the spot like that, and maybe fear of leaving somebody out, but is there anyone or maybe a particular set of people that really come to mind when you think about football knowledge and who you like to follow in the business?
Yeah, so specifically for me, I like people who are looking at things differently than I am, or have a different like the analytics thing, which has obviously become quite a thing in the last couple of years, but it's a massive part of the NFL. Every team is using this data, but aside from like whether or not you should go for it on fourth down, or whether, whatever, all of that stuff that people think of as analytics, I like the fact that that there is more data that kind of goes. You can look at like, well, okay, we think narratively that this guy's not playing well. Is that guy actually not playing well? Or can we pare that down to something that shows us that he's in a bad offense. You know what I mean? That the situation is bad, but he's actually doing okay. I think that that all of the information that we have at our fingertips now, and people who know how to, like people who are like, I have a model and I plugged that into my model, like math people who are just smarter than I am. My brain doesn't work that way. I love following people like that and putting their data into my, my own like mental algorithm. And so like a guy like Eric Eager, who has become one of my favorite follows. Almost everything he tweets, I'm like, I just think his brain is different than mine. His strengths are different than mine. And I love having access to his thoughts. Eric, of course, worked for PFF for a very long time and then left recently to go to Sumer Sports. And he's one of those guys that I've interacted with on Twitter who's become, like, I've met him one time in passing really quick at a Super Bowl. But I consider him a friend, and I would say he's definitely at the top of that list. Warren Sharp is another guy who is really deep in the data and has a great company that comes up with all this stuff. And he puts out a preseason guide that he publishes every year. And the information in it is like, I'm always shocked that there's stuff in there that I still don't know because I'm searching for it on a daily basis throughout the season. And then he still comes up with like a data point. Like he was talking about the Dolphins this year in the preseason guide. And it was about the Dolphins and the fact that their wide receivers had been the worst in creating separation. And then it creates, it tells the story in a way that's digestible about like why this really matters and how this has impacted the quarterbacks there for so long and why they went out and got specifically the different wide receivers that they did and Devontae Parker. And I can't ditch this. Like for fantasy, I was like, don't touch Devontae Parker. Devontae Parker has been like one of the worst wide receivers years running at creating separation. And that is a problem for even other wide receivers in an offense. And so the fact that there are people that kind of create this kind of like, they look at these data points and then they go, that's a problem. This is good. This is how this affects that. I love people who can make me smarter. He falls into that opinion, into that category. Ben Baldwin, who's Computer Cowboy, and Kevin Cole, who used to be at PFF and now has a Substack, Unexpected Points. They put out really good graph data. I'm just constantly, yes, I'm just always looking for people who look at things differently that I can like put in. Now I can put that into my back pocket and use it.
Those visual graphs are also coders. Typically they're doing, Python or R code, and it's a whole nother,
I don't even know what that is.
Another whole nother skill set on top of the data. Yeah. It's so when it comes to my mind with that is like Josh Larkey. He does R coding and does visuals with data as well. But I love data as well. I think it's changed the game and definitely changed the way in which we view it, and also in which teams are kind of managing the team per se. Maybe not to a large degree, but it's coming into consideration when maybe some important crucial decisions are being made, or if they're looking at players in terms of usage or playing time, or even in the off season. So love the analytics and what it's done for the business, and as a ranker, I love looking at data myself as well.
Yeah.
What is your proudest accomplishment in the industry?
Maybe just navigating it in general. Like it's a tough industry to get into. It's a tough industry to stay in. It's a tough industry in which to find a way to stand out. I think that the thing I'm most proud of is that I have did it the way that I wanted to do it. Like my priority getting into this industry, my personality is such that like I didn't want to do it in whatever way it presented itself. Like I very specifically craved credibility out of the gate. Like I wanted to be taken seriously. Like the person who appealed to me the most doing this job when I wanted to get into it was Hannah Storm sitting at the desk doing the NBA on NBC. And the thing that appealed to me, and there's like a deep dive psychological thing, that you could get into about me, here is that like she sat at the desk and she was not there because she was the hot chick, though she was certainly attractive, but she was clearly there because she was good at her job. And when she would lead conversations with the guys at the desk, they took her seriously. They had a conversation with her that was not like, you know what I mean? It felt like she belonged. And that's what I craved. That's what I always wanted my career to be. And so all of the choices that I made along the way, I'm proud that I kind of stuck to that. And I never said yes to a job that wouldn't help me get where I wanted to go to be the person that I wanted to be in the industry with that kind of credibility moniker attached to it. And so I feel like there were choices made, you know, when people wanted me to wear certain things. And I was like, no, I won't. And if you want me to, you can find somebody else. And I will say no to this job and you can move on.
Good for you.
And there were definitely jobs. There were pivot points in my career where I did get pushed back down the ladder because I didn't want to do it the way that someone wanted me to do it. But then someone would move on from that job. And then, you know, the opportunity would come back. So I always kind of operated as if the shelf life in this industry would be somewhat short as a female. I think that's changing a little bit. It's not changed completely. It definitely still exists. You know, like at a certain point, I do think you sort of age out when thinking about, you know, there are, I think women are like when you're looking to cast something, I think people are looking for starlets, you know, as opposed to, and I think it's just a different thought process that is something that people don't do on purpose, but like, you know, the guy can have gravitas and be experienced and whatever. But like when it comes to the girl, like we want whoever's the hottest right now, you know? And so there is an element of that does still, I think, age women out of the industry, or at least out of some specific roles. But I always, knowing that, I was like, the only thing that I know I can control forever is content. I want to get there on content. You know, I don't want it to be because I like can wear a short skirt well or something like that.
Well, I always joke around with my buddies and tell them that we have faces for radio, so that helps. That helps us on the backside where we don't have to report necessarily, and we can you know talk behind the mic and behind the screen. So I fully understand what you are saying, though. Let's talk about. So you mentioned earlier that you don't like hot takes, but do you have maybe necessarily a spicy opinion that most people maybe disagree with?
That we still don't know if Sam Darnold can play or not.
Yeah.
It's almost a joke at this point, right? I'm like, okay, fine, you guys, like on my podcast, I'm like, I promise I won't go into it, but look at Sam Darnold's stats and they're good. And that's all I'm going to say. And they're just this was a big preseason thing for me that came up a lot on the radio, you know, just because people would be like, well, Sam Darnold sucks. And I'm like, I can't let you say it. I'm sorry. I just have to. And so I end up diving back into it. And I'm like, we don't know if he sucks or not. Like, we just don't know. Like, and I'm not saying that he doesn't. I'm not on the like, hey, Sam Darnold's going to be an all-pro at some point, or Sam Darnold's the next Geno Smith or whatever. But like, look at what Sam Darnold's had to do in his career. He's been with like Adam Gase, and then it's Matt Rule. And I think what we do with quarterbacks in particular, but certainly with people across the board in this industry, is you just get a certain number of chances. And then if it hasn't happened, then we just go, I'm just tired. I'm tired of making excuses. But in some cases, it's not excuses. They're just reasons. Mm-hmm. And if you are a quarterback and you have bad coaches who don't know what they're doing, who put you in bad situations, or a bad organization that doesn't draft well around you. Like Drake London is another example this year, or Kyle Pitts. You know, you hear people use the phrase like, oh, well, you know, he hasn't been good this year. And I'm constantly like, no. Like he hasn't had the opportunity to be good. Like you can't phrase that sentence like Kyle Pitts is a bust, and I know that a lot of times these are fantasy conversations. And so, you know, he has been a bust from a fantasy standpoint, but also
it's also been a usage standpoint.
You busted when evaluating him because you should have known that he was going into an offense that wasn't set up in such a way where he was going to be prioritized, and you drafted him too high. So you busted. He didn't bust. Like he's out there playing great ball. They're just not getting him the ball. So there are a lot of situations like that around. Like this is the gray that I'm talking about, right? Like, and where the hot takes kind of just drive me mad because I'm like, it's not that simple. Like, you can't make it that simple. Like, there are other components. There's lots of people that work really hard into putting a product on the field. And ultimately, sometimes it's that the person can't do the job. Sometimes it's that the people who are charged with putting them in a good position just can't do that. And I know that from, like, I've worked with producers. Some producers, you're like, this is so easy. You make it easy for me to do my job. And then some people are like talking to you while you're talking, and you're like, I can't think while you do that. Why are you doing that? You know what I mean? Like, there are certain things that make it harder to be the best you. And I think that we see that in the NFL all the time.
Well, you kind of teed up my next question, because knowing that you're a Sam Darnold truther, you have to drink. So what is your favorite drink?
Sorry. Oh my God. I know. And I do this to myself because I can't just let it go. I just need to let people say Sam Darnold sucks and just go, deep breath. Because now I'm the Sam Darnold truther, and people are like, oh, you're a USC honk. And whatever. And of course, I brought up Drake London too, right? As the next one. So
Drake London's been good in my opinion. I think he's had a good rookie year.
Right?
Yeah, I do. I like Drake London.
It'll be fine. What do I like to drink? I'm a wine person for the most part.
Me as
and
well. I'm a wino.
I'm a full-on soccer mom wine. I'm not like people who are like into wine.
Yeah.
They're not gonna like my wines.
So you're over there drinking like Moscato and Gewürztraminers?
No. I have like two very specific wines that are my white wine. If I'm drinking white wine, then it's Whitehaven Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay.
That's my Sauvignon Blanc. And then if I'm drinking red wine, then it's Meiomi Pinot Noir. Okay. Those are my two. Those are my two that I have like fully stocked in the fridge. Yeah. And then people will like bring me like, here's a bottle of wine. Then you grab me and I'm like, okay, it's not Meiomi. Like, maybe I'll drink that someday if my husband opens it on accident or whatever. But like, I know what I like, and I don't like taking chances. I'm like that as an orderer, period. I'm like, I could get that new thing, but what if I don't like it? Let's just get the thing I know I like, and then I know I'll be happy.
Yeah, my wife is very particular with her wine as well. I'll drink pretty much anything you pour in front of me, but it's I particularly like Cabernet. Cabernet is my go-to. If I'm barbecuing, I like Zinfandel, but I'm a wine person as well. I don't drink a lot of white. I'll cook with it and drink the rest of the bottle because it's there. But I'll primarily, when I'm pouring something to drink and I'm actually like not just cooking, it's usually red wine.
What if you have like fish or something? What if you've like made a nice salmon?
Yeah, I usually cooked with a little bit of the wine, and then I drink the rest.
Okay.
So anytime I'm making seafood, I usually cook with the wine as well. I'm making like a white wine lemon butter sauce or whatever it may be, and then the rest is in the glass.
You're a far more advanced cook than I am, because none of my recipes call for wine. And by the way, there are like 6 recipes, and that's it. And that's the extent of my recipes. I'm so tired of eating the things that I make.
See, I went to culinary school when I was 18. Loved food. Yeah.
You fly planes and you went to culinary school?
Yeah, I love food. I love just like that life. I like the food and wine. Like, it just kind of brings people together, right? Food and wine do. And so worked in restaurants at a young age, and did I started in like as a dishwasher, then started bussing tables, and then started doing serving, and then started cooking, and liked cooking because I didn't have to interact with people as much, and then I could just kind of just do my thing, and then it's like, oh man, we get to eat everything as well, right? And so we're sitting there, and at the end of the night, all the cooks make a meal and they sit down and eat together, and so just love the culture of that, and then just fell in love with food is what it was. And so went to culinary school, cooked for a while, realized, it's not for me. This is a very tough life, long hours. And I'm not going to do well at this in terms of like wanting to see family and doing that kind of stuff. So I, made a path change, but still love to cook. So I cook, 5-6 nights a week for the family, breakfast at least 4 or 5 days a week. Oh. And then,
I need this in my life.
I always tell my wife, I said, I know you married me because I can cook. And she said, absolutely.
Absolutely. Let's not pretend. Like 100%. It's on the list of attributes, right?
Exactly. Oh, man. If you had one superpower, what would it be?
To pause time. Who could do that? Well, who's the superpower? Remember that? No, you don't. This is, again, back to there was that TV show. I think her name was Evie. It was like an old sitcom, and she would go like this, and it would pause time. That's what I would like to do. And I've been thinking about that so much in the last couple of weeks, because I love what I do. I love the cycle of the NFL. I like the fact that there's a pace to it. Every day has its own thing, its own storylines, its own rhythm. I love all of it. Then the holidays come, and I'm like, I want to just hit pause on the football season so that I can actually enjoy the holidays and be with my family and do all of the things and like take a, middle of the day, like go Christmas shopping and spend some time doing that. And then, pick up the kids and not be like, we got to race home because I still have to write the tag for my podcast and I got to get it out. And then we can do this. And like, when the kids are around so much, I hate telling them that I can't, And so, I would very much like to pause time so that then I could do both.
Well, I'll tell you what, Bronco fans probably wish they could rewind time.
Oh my God.
And avoid the Nathaniel Hackett hire. I
think more importantly, avoid a certain trade, but that's also up for discussion.
Yeah, we'll definitely dive into that. Let's talk about Nathaniel Hackett. So Broncos fired Hackett yesterday after a 4-11 start. They lose 51-14 to the Los Angeles Rams, led by Baker Mayfield. What a world we live in today.
Did you see the DVOA, by the way?
I did not yet.
So no. I just saw a tweet, and I was trying to explain to my 8-year-old son DVOA in order for this tweet to make sense, because I was like, oh my gosh. And he's like, what? And I'm like, I can't explain this to you, but I tried. So the in terms of I think it was team DVOA for week 16. The Rams were number 1 with a DVOA of 90 point something percent.
Wow.
And number 2, I don't even remember who was number 2, but they had a DVOA of like 46. Like 90 DVOA, like what? That doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. That's how bad it was.
Yeah, it was embarrassing, honestly. Like one of my best friends in town is a huge Bronco fan, and every year we have a straight money line bet, Broncos versus Niners, and it's great for me because it pays for my kids' 529 accounts. But for him, he's been banging his head against the wall with Nathaniel Hackett. What does this mean for the Denver Broncos moving forward? Maybe not just this year because we're almost nearing the end, but what does it mean for 2022 and beyond?
Well, gosh, where to start?
Yeah, that's a deep question.
So, I mean, look, so they have to make a couple of decisions, I think. One is they have to decide whether or not they think that Russell Wilson can be different with a different coach, with a different system, with a different whatever. Like they need to really, really grind that tape, talk to people in the building, and figure out what happened with Russell Wilson this year. And then if they think that there's evidence that he could be different if things were different, then they need to find somebody that's willing to take that on. Because by the way, if they think the answer is no, then I think that they need to eat the money. I think that they need to do it, because why dig yourself deeper into a hole just because, oh man, we paid so much money? Like if it's going to get worse, then, cut bait and pay the money. And I know that that's easier said from this room, where it's not my money.
There's 161 million reasons why they wouldn't, but there's
100%. But I also think, but again, if everyone there is like, no, but no, and because it's not even just the field stuff, right?
It's the locker room as well.
You have to say, okay, so let's say I could fix the football stuff. Mm-hmm. Let's say I could come up with a system where he would be different. The results would be different from a football standpoint. Then we need to decide if we can have a conversation with him that is a real come to Jesus moment, that is like, you have to be different. Like this isn't
no
working.
No more let's go Broncos country, let's ride stuff.
Yeah, and how do you make somebody who is wired the way that he is understand why? I'm sure he's just sitting there feeling very attacked because he's just trying his hardest to be the best. And he doesn't understand the ways in which his approach to that is off-putting for the people around him.
It's very mechanical.
So you have to find a way to get through to him so that then he can understand that. You take away the office, you take away the secondary locker room or whatever. Like you have to rebuild the team if he's still there. So you have to figure out if you could do that. And then who's the person to do that? So the names that have come up, I don't think Sean Payton even answers the phone, because it just doesn't make sense to me why he would take that on, when I think that there will be other opportunities where he's more set up to succeed. And obviously the Chargers are a team that has been mentioned a lot. I don't know if that job will be available to him, but you can understand why he would want that more. Like, I could go work with Justin Herbert. And also there are things I could fix with Justin Herbert. You know what I mean? Like, half the country thinks he sucks after last night's game. And then also
he still has one of the best arm strengths in the NFL. It has a supporting cast. He's young. They're going to be able to. He gets to live in sunny California as well. There's a lot of benefits to the job outside of just the talent available on the team. And he's expressed interest in it as well.
I don't know how I would do it, right? Like, but I guarantee you that Justin Herbert, the things that happen that make people wonder if he belongs where people like me think he belongs in terms of like the upper echelon of quarterbacks, someone like Sean Payton can 100% revamp that offense. And all of a sudden Justin Herbert's unlocked. Like, people talk about the challenge and the ego that coaches have, and that they might find the Russell Wilson thing appealing because I could fix this, you know? I mean, Justin Herbert offers you the exact same thing to a degree. You could fix Justin Herbert, and I see the upside. Like, there's so much upside. I don't see the upside with Russell Wilson. I think it's going to bog somebody's career down, and I think that that's something, or it's potentially going to do that, and I think they have to factor that in. So you hear names like Darrell Bevell or Dan Quinn because they're attached to Russell Wilson from the past. They already have a relationship with him. They've worked with him, and maybe they know the keys here. I think that you have to figure out who is most likely to calculate that they can emerge unscathed from a year with Wilson if best case scenario doesn't happen. And I think maybe Dan Quinn is potentially that type of guy because he's a defensive guy. Yep. The defense is already good. They will continue to be good, I assume. He could potentially calculate an exit possibility for himself by bringing in offensive people to work with Russell. And then let's say he manages the games better than Nathaniel Hackett did, and the team itself is better. Even if Russell Wilson is not good, then you also have the new coach coming in has the benefit of, we've seen this for a year now. So if they can't fix Russell, then it looks very much like it's Russell. You know what I mean? So you just have to find a coach. I think the coach for whom this job looks appealing is someone that knows that they can emerge either way and not have it be a career killer for them.
So listening to your podcast yesterday, you interviewed Sean Droder and Doug Farrar, and both of them mentioned the word gravitas when describing what is needed for Denver. You mentioned a couple names that I believe have gravitas, like Dan Quinn. Yeah. There's a couple other names that have been linked to the head coaching vacancy, and in my opinion have gravitas. Someone like D'Amico Ryans, who is the defensive coordinator for San Francisco. Now, at what point does this organization say we want someone with gravitas and we want someone who's going to bring in that grittiness to the team and structure and maybe, you know, respect, but also look at it and say our defense already has that. We need someone that has an offensive mind in this business that's going to be able to develop. I mean, it's hard to say here. We are talking about developing Russell Wilson. Sorry. It's more of, you know, fixing Russell Wilson and his regression that he had in 2022 and maybe regaining that confidence in order for this team to be the caliber team which we expected in the beginning of the year. Is there anyone other than like Dan Quinn, D'Amico Ryans that you would think that would fit that mold?
Not off the top of my head that feels like an obvious candidate. Like there are some really strong offensive minds that I think are going to be candidates this year, but I can't think of any that have a real solid background. And I think what they need right now is they need someone who they know can do like you could bring in an offensive coordinator. Like you could bring in your own Mike McDaniel, right? Mm-hmm. Like that type of guy to be the OC, you know, who's going to sit there and love up Russell Wilson and work through all of that in an offensive coordinator role. I think what they desperately need most at the head coaching position, especially because of the game management stuff that was a problem for Hackett, which I kept saying all year, like, that's not something that's their fault. they hired an inexperienced head coach, and then it is his fault that he put a bunch of inexperienced and young coaches around him and didn't surround himself with a little bit more experience. But I think you see coaches all over the place now that have guys whose job it is to be game management experts. These head coaches have a lot on their plate. And I know people sit on the couch and go, well, I know when to call a timeout because I play Madden. Like, I get that. I get that sitting where you're sitting with the time slowed down because you have no pressure on you. You can take in all this information in a different way. If you're standing on the sideline and you have, it's like, I was, liken it back to broadcasting. Like, yeah, if you're sitting there thinking like the thoughts that you have in your head, you would be able to articulate very well if someone put you on TV. But now factor in that they're counting in your ear and telling you what's coming up next while you're saying these things. And you just have the pressure is greater, right?
Multitasking.
And like you're multitasking like crazy. You're not just talking. Like that's not what happens in TV. So I think clearly the same is true for an NFL head coach. There's a lot going through their head all the time. And so I don't think it was surprising that he wasn't a great game manager. But I do think that since that was such a problem for him, they need to bring somebody in for whom that is not an issue. So if you bring in like a Dan Quinn, just to go back to Dan Quinn, because that's an easy example right now. Someone who stood on a sideline, has been a head coach. He's kind of like gone through some of the problems that have arisen. He's learned from them. He's then gone back and been a DC, had a lot of success. I think he can step into that role and be like, this is how I'm going to do things differently this time. He can stand in front of a room. Everyone buys in. He knows how to manage the different egos and personalities. And then he brings in an offensive guy. And he hopefully, and I think he does, has the kind of self-confidence that he doesn't need to get credit for all of these things. Like, I'm going to be over here. I'm going to do this thing. And I know I'm really good at this. And I'll focus on the defense. And I'll focus on the game management. And I will be a team leader. And then you deal with Russell and fix this offense. And I give you all the power to do that. And I think that's what they need. Is somebody who has the gravitas, to go back to that word, to just stand there and be like, you know what? I don't need to micromanage everything. I don't have everything in the world riding on this. Like, I know I'm a good coach. Go, you do you,
Yeah, it's, it's very clear that Hackett couldn't hack it here in Denver. And we do need the gravitas in order to succeed. But as a reminder for folks, I do think that Russell Wilson is at least here for one more year due to this contract. For a reminder for those who are listening, he signed a 5-year, $242 million contract in the offseason. And while it seems very appealing to, jettison this contract and move on, we mentioned it earlier, there's 161 million reasons why this probably is unlikely, although the new owners come from a lot of money and have the ability to actually, make that decision. And if they choose to eat that contract and start from fresh, they could choose to do so. I do believe it would cripple the rebuild, though, at least for the next couple years. But it would at least set a precedence and at least, begin the gravitas of the new rebuild. For a reminder for folks, this contract, 107 million dead cap hit if he's cut right now, 82 million if he's traded prior to June 1st. 2023, the dead money gets a little bit better. Dead money trade is 82 million.
God, that's so gross. It gets better. It's only 80. What?
2024, it gets a little better. If he's traded, 68 million is still 85 million cap hit. 2025 is 49.6 million on both sides. That's traded or cut. And then it goes to 31 million, 12.8 million to 4 million. So it seems unlikely that he's going to be traded or cut, although we have seen crazy things happen. Look at the Matt Ryan contract that just happened as well. So there are teams that will cut bait and move on. So knowing the contract details, do you think that we see one more year of Russell Wilson in Denver?
I think it depends because I think all the signs point to, so yes, probably yes, right?
Yeah,
because
it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but then also there's such a sample size prior to this year. Like, this year has been so confusing to so many people.
Yeah.
Like, why, where, what, like how did that guy turn into this guy? And so I do think that it's probably more likely than not that somebody will say, like, we got to try to find another way. And so that, coupled with the financial implications, will probably lead to one more year. That said, like I said at the beginning, I think you reserve the right to, like, I think that they would be smart to go on a fact-finding mission and talk to people. Like I said at the beginning, like, I love hearing from people who can, like, here's what I think is true. Is it really true? And then go ask people and be open to whatever their answer is. Like, people who are real hardcore quarterback analysts and evaluators, and people who know what they're seeing. And a lot of us sitting on the outside don't know exactly what we're seeing, right?
Yeah.
So go find the people that do. Talk to the people who worked with him this year. Find out what the issues were. What did you ask him to do? And then what did he do? Where were the hangups? Where did we, like, where did the miscommunications happen? Like, where did we lose this? And really find out that information and be open to what the answers are.
So it's amazing because when I look, you talked about I forget the word you used, like the mold, or I should say, I have a process when I'm doing rankings, and he hit every red flag in the beginning of the year, and I ignored it because it was Russell Wilson. And I said, okay, I don't like to usually draft quarterbacks or wide receivers when they have a new coach. Okay, check the box. I don't like a new system. Check the box. Right? Don't like new supporting casts. Check the box. Right? And so he hit all these red flag boxes for me when I was doing my evaluations and my rankings. And I said, it's Russell Wilson. He's been in the NFL. He's going to be able to overcome these obstacles. Right? And so I look back at it because I always like to reflect on my own processes and see how do I improve, and then analyze that. But going back to the NFL now, because I know I was wrong as an analyst, but going back to the NFL, who's more wrong in this scenario? Was it Hackett? Was it Wilson? Or is George Patton supposed to take some of this blame as the GM who went out and made this trade to begin with? I mean, these trade details, Russell Wilson, Broncos got Russell Wilson in the 2022 fourth. Okay, that's it. Now let's talk about what the Seahawks got. They got Drew Lock, okay, big deal. But they got Shelby Harris. They got Noah Fant. They got 2022 first-round pick. They got 2022 second-round pick, a 2022 fifth-round pick, a 2023 first-round pick. I'm not done yet, folks. And another 2023 second-round pick. At some point, ownership needs to take a look at George Patton here and say, he has to have some of this blame. I know Russell Wilson didn't play well, and the joke is that, he has too many bathrooms in his house. Maybe they should close one off, and every touchdown they give him another bathroom back. Until he can finally get to his touchdown quota. But all jokes aside, this was one of the worst trades I've seen in the NFL history.
Yeah.
And at what point do you say as an owner, we need a change in leadership at a GM level?
Yeah. I think there's no doubt that the seat is insanely hot because to me, it all goes there. Like, I blame the decision-making more than I blame Russell Wilson. Correct. And more than I blame Nathaniel Hackett. Like, to me, this offseason, and we talked about it a little bit on the NFL Rhodes Show going into the season, I didn't see it. Like, I mean, the odds for the Broncos for the Super Bowl were crazy high. Like, they were one of the highest in terms of, Super Bowl odds. That I was like, I wish I want to bet against that without betting for someone. I just want to be like, no, what are the odds they don't? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, that's the one I want. Because to me, it felt like there were way too many red flags. You haven't seen the Broncos offense. Now, I know that in the past, the argument was like, well, we just don't have the quarterback. Correct. And so the quarterback was going to unlock all of these other things. And like Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, like, good. But like, did we see them as being like, oh my God, they're the best. Look at the things that they're doing. If they just had someone who could get them the ball. Like, to me, I didn't feel like we'd seen that. So it wasn't an obvious, like, I didn't buy into the weapons to that degree because I hadn't seen it. Yeah. And then you've got a brand new head coach, and there's going to be a learning curve there. And it's a brand new head coach that I think we all thought was brought for a totally different quarterback, right? Like, if you paired him with Aaron Rodgers, then there's history, there's language, we know there's shorthand, right?
There's Aaron Rodgers calling all the plays.
There's that. But then, you know what? Why isn't Russell that? Because that's one of the things that Sean Drotar said on my podcast yesterday that I thought I want to follow up on this. And then the conversation just didn't get back there. He brought up, Peyton Manning. When he went, he can work with an Adam Gase. It doesn't really matter because at that point he's running the offense.
Yeah.
And same with Aaron Rodgers.
Tom Brady.
Aaron Rodgers could come to Denver. It doesn't really matter because he's running the offense. Why isn't Russell running the offense? Why does it matter so much for Russell? Russell is at a stage in his career where
he should be.
If he is the quarterback that we thought he was before, if any of our priors were correct, then he should be a guy that should be able to manage that too. And clearly he's not. He's not of that caliber. So I think that there were also red flags that we saw from Russell the last 2 years in Seattle, which doesn't explain why there were also times when he looked great, but the end of the year for the last 2 years that he was in Seattle, it fell apart. Both years.
Yep.
In inexplicable ways where we were asking he must have been hurt, right? No, they say he's not hurt. They swear he's not hurt. Pete Carroll is adamant. And then the season ends. And you're like, well, now they're going to tell us that he was hurt the whole time and they were lying to us because now there's nothing to lose. Season ended. No, he was fine. I'm like, what? Well, then what was it? So to me, we had seen an indication there. There were red flags coming out of Seattle. It's not just that Russell Wilson went to Denver and fell apart and became a quarterback we'd never seen before. We had seen it. We'd seen it in stretches. We just hadn't seen it for the whole time. So a whole season size sample size of Russell Wilson like this is just mind blowing to us. But we had seen this before. There were reasons that I wouldn't have made the deal. Even when they made the deal, I was like, I don't think this is a good deal because of that. Because you don't know that he's not going to be that guy in Denver. And you better know that if you're going to give up all that. And then they not only made the trade, but then they double down and they give him the contract before they've even seen it. They didn't need to.
Yeah, a lot of red flags, a lot of bad decision making from leadership, in my opinion. I wish the Broncos best of luck in 2023. They're going to need it because I think we'll see some positive regression from Russell Wilson again. But we shall see what happens with the coaching and the new mesh and again a new system now. So we'll have to see how that unfolds. Speaking of unfolding, the playoff picture is starting to unfold here for the 2022 playoffs. AFC, Bills, Chiefs, Bengals, Ravens, and Chargers have all clinched a playoff berth. We have the NFC, the Eagles, Vikings, 49ers, and Cowboys who have clinched it. Yes, the red and gold in the back have clinched. Now, in the hunt, we have the Jaguars. They actually face off against Tennessee Week 18. That'll be an important game. And then we have the Miami Dolphins. They've been imploding as of late.
Yeah, they have.
The Tua concussion definitely adds another layer of complexity to the situation. What do you think happens, I should say, this week with Tua? They're going to want to play him, but the debacle that unfolded at the beginning of the year with the concussion.
Yeah.
3 concussions now in 2 months that's like shutdown territory from a health perspective, in my opinion. What do you think the Dolphins are thinking going into week 17?
Oh shit.
Yeah.
I think that's what they're thinking. I don't think there's any chance that they can play him this week. I just don't think they can. And it's the worst time. It's the worst all of these things, right? But they can't. They just can't, especially under the circumstances, because it wasn't like he hit his head and they took him out as a matter of precaution, the way that sometimes happens because the spotter saw something and he still passed all the concussion tests and he didn't actually have a concussion, but they were being careful. It wasn't that. He continued to play the game. Him, of all people. Yeah. After what happened earlier this season, he played the rest of the game with a concussion and no one knew he had it. And then he goes to the doctor and says, I'm having concussion symptoms. Like, he has to self-report. This is worst case scenario for concussions for the league. And so even if Miami wanted to absolutely make the reckless decision and the wrong decision, I think the league steps in and they say, we have way too much to lose here as a brand. You can't play him. You just can't. So I don't think there's any chance that Tua, under the circumstances, plays this week. And then that puts Miami's playoff hopes on the bubble, you know?
Yep. Yeah, it definitely would put them in the bubble. They would clinch a playoff berth this week if they win and the Jets lose or the Jets tie. The other option for them to clinch a playoff berth is if, of course, the Dolphins win, the Jets lose, and Pittsburgh loses or ties. We have a question from the listener asking, what do you think are the chances of the Jets making the playoffs with Mike White returning?
Okay. Well, first of all, a million times greater, right? Like way better. And that's such a bummer. And this is my favorite late season storyline. My favorite, the fact that I have said out loud so many times, like, oh no, we don't have Mike White this week, like down the fantasy stretch of the season in the playoffs, not because we want to play Mike White necessarily, but because of what he does to Garrett Wilson and Zonovan Knight and like just the offense.
He can move the ball.
I mean, Conklin, like whatever, like the offense is better with Mike White. We know that. I want Mike White there. And I feel way more confident that they have a chance if Mike White's the quarterback, which tells you everything you need to know about Zach Wilson, which is sad, but whatever. I think that that's done. What is the Jets' schedule? I don't have that in front of me, so that becomes obviously a factor.
I save it as my screen share desktop so I can take a look at the schedule for fantasy purposes.
That's great.
So the New York Jets, they got Jaguars and then Seahawks.
Wait, they have the Jaguars?
Am I looking the wrong line?
Yeah, I'm seeing. No, the Jaguars was last week. They have the Seahawks, and then they have the Dolphins.
Correct. I'm looking at the fantasy schedule.
They have the Dolphins head to
Yes.
head, week 18.
That's going to be a big game.
Oh, I'm not confident about the Dolphins at all. I actually like the Jets' chances very much. Then.
Wow. Okay, Scott, you heard it there. Lindsay's taking the Jets.
This is. I'm thinking that the Dolphins don't have Tua. So here's the question, and I should know the answer, and I don't. Is Teddy healthy?
He wasn't last week. I don't know what the status is as of this week. So it's gonna. I think you know how the NFL is though. They like to press for people to get healthy in time for games. So we'll see. But I have not read reports this morning, so I have not read the news reports on whether they were supposed to be limited or not limited this week. We'll have to watch the official reports as they come out. But I do not know that answer as of right now.
If they have Teddy, then they're still in the mix.
Okay.
If they don't have Teddy, then I think we're looking to 2023 for the Dolphins.
Okay. Moving to the NFC, Buccaneers. Does Brady sneak in again?
Oh, God.
So they get in this week. Carolina, so they're playing Carolina week 17, right? Then week 18, they get Atlanta. They clinch the division with a win. That's it this week.
I don't know if they get it. Now, let's go back to my Sam Darnold trutherness, right?
Oh, here we go.
Look at what the Panthers did last week to me. And I realized, this is, again, I'm like, this is the beauty of having my own podcast. So I get to talk about what I want to talk about. I was like, so the most surprising thing that happened in week 16 was Lions-Panthers. Like if I was leading a nationally televised, a TV show, they'd be like, no, you can't say that. That we don't care about them. No one cares about them. That's what I cared about. Like that, to me, that was literally the most shocking thing that happened this week was that the Lions lost to the Panthers in the way that they lost to the Panthers. Like, and from a fantasy standpoint, I think it was the most shocking thing too, because a lot of people, no one said you got to play Deontay Foreman this week. Like everyone was like, no, because the Lions defense is bonkers good all of a sudden. And they're not just like limiting random bad running backs to few points. Like they're playing very good running backs and they are holding them down.
The running game is something that they were actually strong on for the most part of the year. It was the only strength of the defense up until late. And then, the slot, they've been giving up the most fantasy points in the slot all season long. Like I was high on DJ Moore this week. I moved him to wide receiver 14. My counterpart Jody had him at wide receiver 13. Power to him for moving him up even more. We were talking about this game. We were talking about the possible fantasy explosion from DJ Moore ever since they started moving him into the slot when Sam Darnold came back. So from a fantasy perspective, we love DJ Moore in the slot matchups. Oh, hell no did we like Foreman or Chuba and expect they were going to run for 300 yards.
So I don't know what's happening in Carolina. I don't know who gets credit. I don't know. But I would not write them off. in that mix. I don't know. The loss of JC Horn, I think, is big.
Yeah.
Going up against Brady. But I think also with the Bucs, you're looking at them, and Doug Farrar went into a lot of detail about this on my podcast, about like all the things that they're not doing with Brady. You know, like the fact that they're not doing play action or no huddle, like the things that they're not doing with him that aren't just a part of the offense that he has always had as part of his offense that has led to a lot of success for him. The fact that they're not doing some of these things as a part of the base offense is weird. And then when they need something like crunch time drive, they go to these things all of a sudden and it unlocks the offense. And all of a sudden you put together this surgical strike type of drive like he had in overtime, where it was like, where's that? Where's that been all year? You know, you can get it out of him. People who watch him play say that he's playing great still. Like the team is just a mess.
It is.
And so I think you could point to some of the things that some of the decision making there in terms of like how to run an offense that's been very head scratching. So I don't feel comfortable betting on them to change that. All year long, I've said like, it's gotta click. Look at these weapons. Are you kidding?
Yeah, I was way too high on Russell Gage at the beginning of the year because I thought this offense was going to click.
Right.
And it's, unfortunately, it just took Russell Gage 15 weeks to get there.
15. Yes, totally. I know. On everyone's benches. Yeah. Congratulations.
Or on the waiver wire.
Totally.
So the last two teams that are looking at clinching a playoff berth this week are the New York Giants. So this week they get Indianapolis. Next week they get Philadelphia. If they win, they're in this week. What do you think the chances are?
Indy and Philadelphia, and they need one win.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, they should get it this week.
They should get it this week. I think so as well. And then the last team is Washington. Washington, week 17 gets Cleveland, and then they get Dallas week 18. The scenario this week is if Washington wins and Seattle loses, plus if Detroit loses, plus if Green Bay loses or ties, Washington is in.
That's a lot of if this happens, then Washington's in, which leads me to believe that one of those things is going to happen and Washington is in. The question for me is who quarterbacks them? That's
where I was going to go next. Is it Heineke, or are we going to see Wentz? Because he did relieve him in that poor effort last week.
I think it's a really tough call, to be honest with you, because now you've put yourself in a position to make a choice, which means it can be the wrong choice.
And they saw
either
life
one of them.
Once they made once they made that change, the offense saw a little bit of life.
Yeah, but statistically, they were pretty same in that game in terms of like completion percentage and success. So the problem for Heineke was the turnovers that just came at the worst possible time. Yeah. The thing that's interesting to me about Wentz is that at the beginning of the year, that team, we know from a fantasy standpoint, it's not necessarily that they were having a ton of success as a team, but like from a fantasy standpoint, so many of those weapons were going crazy at the beginning of the year when Wentz was the guy. Wentz even was a fantasy asset at the beginning of the year.
Yep. He was hot.
But the run game wasn't, right? So now you've got a run game that they are more committed to. Although, frankly, Brian Robinson this past week, like they kept feeding him the rock.
I don't know
and you're
why
like,
they keep doing it. It makes he's a plotter.
It's not working, guys.
Yeah.
Like, what did he average? I think it was like 2.6 a carry in that game. I mean, it was the Niners, right? So the Niners are a team that I wouldn't necessarily do that against. But as I was watching that game unfold, I was like, what are you doing, Washington? Like Brian Robinson, 22 rush attempts for 58 yards and a 2.6 yard per carry average. Like at the very least, because you know that you've got some of these big play weapons on the outside. Like, yes, it might lead to a turnover, but I think you're playing mentally in a position where like the Niners are the favorite and you're going to have to take some chances to win the game. And giving Brian Robinson the ball, especially the way it was going, is not taking chances. Like now you're just running out the clock. Like you're just playing to play. So, take a shot at Jahan Dotson, take a shot at Terry McLaurin, like give these guys a chance to make a play to go win you the game. This is like one of the things that really stood out to me about the Lions last year when they were bad was that they would take those chances. They would like do the onside kick at a random time of the game. Just be like, we know we need an extra possession to win this game. Like that's who we are. So we're going to be aggressive because otherwise we don't have a shot at beating this team straight up. I feel like if you're the Commanders, you need to go into that game against the Niners and say, we're not going to beat this team straight up. So let's finagle a couple extra possessions out of this. And to me, Brian Robinson, like 22 handoffs, it's the most conservative approach that you could take that to me was never going to lead to a win, and it didn't.
I fully agree, Lindsay. Well, I want to say thank you for your time today. I thoroughly enjoyed our discussion and talking about the Week 16 recap and getting to know you a little bit better earlier in the show. Why don't you tell the listeners where to find you and what you're working on?
So the NFL Rhodes Show podcast is available wherever you get your podcasts. There's 3 a week that come out during the football season. Monday's a reaction to the games. Wednesday, we deep dive a specific topic. This week, in fact, I'm really looking forward to this week's Wednesday episode is with Dane Brugler, who covers the draft for The Athletic. And we're kind of doing like a draft preview. Like you mentioned that you're not really like hardcore into college football because you don't have the headspace for it. Same. But I do love, once this pivots to the draft, getting to know who the guys are that need to be on our radar.
100%.
So we did like a college football bowl guide, the games that are left. Who should you be paying attention to? Because these are the guys that are going to be the guys that we're going to be talking about come draft time, so that you can kind of watch those games that everybody tunes into at this time of year with that in mind. If you are a Texans fan or whatever, like who your team might go get. And so it's really interesting. And he says some things about the running back position in particular that I've already locked away for fantasy purposes. Because I think that this offseason is going to be so fascinating from a running back standpoint with all of the big name free agents and with a very deep draft class and Bijan Robinson, obviously lingering there in the draft. But I digress. And then Friday's NFL Rhodes Show podcast is we call it Fantasy 15. And it's just a real quick 15-minute, like my favorite fantasy plays of the week, and then the guys that stand out as guys that I don't like, where I'm different than the field, that where I know they're popular plays, but I have concerns about them, and so it's just a real quick 15-minute burst. And so that's that. And then I'm also on Fantasy Dirt on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and DirectTV's Fantasy Zone channel for 2 more weeks.
That's a whole new endeavor. I wonder what's going to happen with it moving to YouTube. I mean,
Me too.
See once you have the details, got to let us know.
Please call me.
Well, everybody, make sure to follow Lindsay on Twitter at Lindsay_Rhodes. That's RHODES. Again, Lindsay, thank you for joining me on the Grind Time podcast, powered by Full Time Fantasy and the FFWC. Have a good day, everybody, and good luck in your Week 17 matchups if you're still alive. Take care.
Yay, good luck. Thanks.